I was 28 years old, and I hadn't been camping since I was 12. I said yes to the trip because Edwin asked me directly, in person, sitting across from me at a coffee shop in Morgantown with his hands wrapped around a mug he wasn't drinking from. He didn't push. He just said he was planning this thing and he wanted me to come, and the way he said it made refusing feel like a small betrayal. So I said yes. The plan was 5 days on a remote stretch of the Appalachian Trail running through Monongahela National Forest in eastern West Virginia. We'd start from the Seneca Rocks trailhead off Route 33 and move northeast into backcountry that left the maintained trail system entirely after the first day. Edwin had sourced the route from a wilderness forum and printed the topo maps himself. He showed me the stack of them one afternoon, all marked up with elevation lines and campsites he'd circled in red pen. The group was 6 people: me, Edwin, Madison, Freddie, Kennedy, and Frank. We'd all known each other since college. Edwin was moving to Portland in 3 weeks. Kennedy had already relocated to Austin the month before. Freddie was taking a position in Singapore in the fall. The night before we left, sitting in the parking lot of a Sheetz in Elkins filling water bottles under the fluorescent lights, I said out loud that this was probably the last time all 6 of us would be in the same place. I said it as a joke or close to one. Nobody laughed, but nobody disagreed. We met at the Seneca Rocks Visitor Center the next morning, June 14th, a little after 9. The building was small and wooden and looked like it had been there a long time. Inside it smelled like old carpet and pine cleaner. A ranger sat behind the desk near the door, a woman in her 40s or 50s with gray-streaked brown hair cut short beneath a flat-brimmed hat. Her name tag said Maggie Park. Edwin handed her the trail permit form he'd filled out ahead of time. She looked it over without saying anything, stamped it twice, and slid it back across the desk. "That section has an unusually high rate of incomplete returns," she said. Edwin nodded, waiting for her to explain. She looked at him for a moment, then said, "Hikers who sign out but whose cars are never claimed from the lot." She said it without alarm. She said it the way a person mentions a thing they have mentioned many times before, and stopped expecting to change anything. "Understood," Edwin said. "We'll be careful." She handed him a copy of the stamped permit and told him to leave it on the dashboard of his car in the trailhead lot. He thanked her. We walked out. Nobody said anything about it until we were back in the cars. Kennedy asked if we should be worried. Edwin said no, that people got lost in the woods all the time because they didn't prepare properly. He said we had maps and a compass and enough food for 7 days if we needed it. He said it confidently, the way Edwin said most things. Frank, sitting in the back seat of my car, said, "Incomplete returns is a weird way to put it." I agreed, but I didn't say so out loud. We drove to the trailhead, a gravel lot off Route 33 with space for maybe 15 cars. Only 3 others were parked there. Edwin left the stamped permit on his dashboard like Maggie Park had told him to, and we shouldered our packs and started walking. The first day was easy. The trail was marked with white blazes painted on the trees every 100 feet or so, and the weather was clear, and the ground was dry enough that we didn't have to worry about mud. We covered 14 miles before Edwin called it and said we should make camp. By then it was late afternoon, and the light was starting to go golden through the trees. We stopped near a creek called Laurel Fork. The water was clear and cold and moving fast over smooth stones. Madison filtered water while Freddie and I set up the tents. Kennedy and Frank gathered firewood. Edwin marked our position on the topo map with a pencil and wrote the date next to it. All 6 of us were in good spirits. The group was loud, joking, filling the forest with the noise of people who had known each other a long time. Frank did an impression of the ranger at the visitor center saying, "Incomplete returns," in a flat monotone, and Kennedy laughed so hard she had to sit down. Madison told a story about a camping trip she'd been on in college, where someone had forgotten to pack a tent and had tried to sleep under a tarp that blew away in the middle of the night. I noticed, with some relief, that the trip already felt like the right decision. We cooked dinner over the fire, freeze-dried meals rehydrated with boiled creek water, and ate sitting on logs Edwin and Freddie had dragged over to make a rough circle. The conversation drifted the way it does when people are tired and comfortable. Frank talked about his new job. Kennedy talked about Austin. Edwin talked about Portland and how he didn't know anyone there yet but was looking forward to it. I didn't say much. I just listened. By the time it was fully dark, Madison and Kennedy had gone to their tent, and Freddie was brushing his teeth at the creek. Frank was still sitting by the fire, poking at it with a stick, and Edwin was going through his pack, reorganizing something. I crawled into my tent and into my sleeping bag and lay there listening to the others still talking outside. Their voices were low and easy. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out once and went quiet. I thought about what Maggie Park had said at the visitor center. Incomplete returns. It was a strange way to put it. The maintained trail ended on the morning of day 2, and Edwin took over navigation using the topo maps he'd printed at home. The forest changed after that. It got thicker, quieter. The undergrowth was high enough that it brushed against our thighs as we walked, and the canopy closed out most of the sky. I could still see patches of blue through the branches, but they were small and scattered, and the light that made it through was dim and green-tinted. I noticed Frank had gone quiet. That was unusual. Frank was normally the loudest person in any group. He filled silence as a reflex, the way some people breathe. He told jokes. He narrated what he was doing. He asked questions he already knew the answers to just to keep conversation going. But since morning he'd been walking at the back of the line without speaking. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone has off days. But then I turned around to check on him and found him standing still on the trail, not resting, just standing there, looking back the way we'd come. I stopped and waited for him to catch up. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine," he said. "Just tired." He said it calmly, not defensively. His face didn't look tired. It looked blank. I nodded and kept walking. An hour later, I turned around again and he was doing the same thing, standing still, looking back. This time I didn't ask. We made good progress that day. Edwin had us moving at a steady pace, and by late afternoon we'd covered another 12 miles. We set up camp on a flat stretch of ground near a dry creek bed. The air was cool and still. Nobody talked much. Kennedy made dinner on the camp stove, some kind of instant pasta that we ate straight out of the pot, passing it around. Frank ate his share and went to his tent without saying goodnight. Madison looked at me across the fire and raised her eyebrows. I shrugged. I didn't know what to tell her. The next day was day 3, and it was warm. We started early, before the sun was fully up, and by afternoon the heat had settled into the trees and wasn't moving. I was sweating through my shirt. My water bottle was almost empty. When we crossed a narrow stream around 3 in the afternoon, I told the group I needed to stop and refill my filter. Edwin said they'd keep moving and I could catch up. I nodded and dropped my pack. The stream was shallow, maybe 6 inches deep, running over smooth stones. I knelt down and submerged the filter intake, watching the clear water flow through the cartridge into my bottle. It took a few minutes. When I stood up, brushing dirt off my knees, I saw something in the root hollow of a large red oak about 15 feet off the trail. I almost walked past it. What stopped me was the color. A patch of faded red nylon, folded and tucked, clearly placed rather than dropped. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, then pushed through the undergrowth to get a closer look. It was a shallow natural depression in the ground between 2 roots, maybe 3 feet across. The bottom was lined with flat stones, fitted together like someone had taken the time to arrange them. And sitting on top of the stones filling the hollow were objects. A woman's wallet, brown leather, cracked at the fold. A child's sneaker, size 4, the Velcro tab still fastened. A folded piece of notebook paper with handwriting on it. A man's watch with a broken strap. A hunting knife with initials carved into the handle. a small laminated prayer card. 14 objects in total. I counted them twice. They were arranged without apparent order, but they were arranged. Not scattered, not dropped, placed. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the hollow from a distance, wide enough to get the whole thing in frame. Then I crouched down and picked up the wallet. The leather was stiff and dry, the kind of dry that comes from sitting outside for a long time. I opened it carefully, half expecting it to crack apart in my hands. The driver's license inside belonged to a woman named Ivy Bryant. Address in Roanoke, Virginia. Issued in 2009. Her photo showed a woman in her late 20s or early 30s. Light brown hair, neutral expression. The kind of photo everyone has on their license. I took a picture of it. Then I set the wallet down and picked up the child's shoe. It was small, blue with white stripes, the kind a 4-year-old would wear. I took a picture of that too. The folded note was next. I photographed it but didn't open it. I didn't want to touch it more than I had to. I stood up, brushing my hands on my jeans, and put my phone back in my pocket. Then I shouldered my pack and started after the group. I caught up with them 20 minutes later. They were stopped on a ridge, drinking water and checking the map. Edwin looked up when I approached. "Find anything interesting?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I found something strange." I pulled out my phone and opened the Photos app. The group gathered around me. Kennedy leaned in close. Frank stayed where he was, a few feet back. "What is it?" Madison asked. I swiped to the most recent photo. The screen showed the hollow from a distance, the red nylon visible, the objects blurred enough that you couldn't make out details. I swiped again to show them the close-up of Ivy Bryant's license. The photo wasn't there. I stopped, stared at the screen, swiped back, then forward again. The photo of the wallet was there. The photo of the license was gone. I swiped again. The photo of the shoe was gone too. Only the first image remained, the wide shot of the hollow, blurred and ambiguous. "What am I looking at?" Kennedy asked. I didn't answer. I opened the recently deleted folder. Nothing. I hadn't deleted them. I checked the cloud backup settings. Everything was turned on. I closed the app and opened it again. Same result. One photo. The rest gone. "There were more," I said. "I took more photos, a driver's license, a kid's shoe. They were here a minute ago." Edwin took the phone from my hand and looked at it. He swiped through the photos, then handed it back to me. "Maybe they didn't save," he said. "They saved," I said. "I saw them. I checked them before I put the phone away." "Then where are they?" I didn't have an answer. I stood there holding my phone out, the screen showing the single remaining blurred photo of the hollow, and no one said anything for a moment. I brought Edwin back to the hollow a few minutes after showing the group the photos. He didn't say much on the walk there, just nodded when I told him where it was, and followed me through the undergrowth. The red oak was easy to find. The patch of faded nylon was still visible from the trail, a spot of color that didn't belong. Edwin crouched beside the hollow and looked at the objects for a long moment without touching anything. Then he reached in and picked up the prayer card, holding it close to read the text. His lips moved slightly as he read, though I couldn't hear what he was saying. He set it down gently and picked up the watch next, turning it over in his hands to examine the broken strap in the face. The second hand was frozen at the 7. He ran his thumb across the glass and then placed it back where he'd found it. The hunting knife was next. He lifted it carefully, angling the handle to catch the light through the canopy. There were initials carved into it. 3 letters, rough and uneven, like someone had done it with another blade. He traced them with his finger, then set the knife down. He went through the rest of the objects the same way. The woman's wallet, which he opened and looked at without removing anything inside. the child's sneaker, which he held by the Velcro strap and turned slowly in his hand, the folded piece of notebook paper which he left folded. He touched each object like he was trying to understand something about it, something more than what it was. When he finished, he sat back on his heels and wiped his hands on his jeans, even though his hands weren't dirty. "I don't know what this is," he said finally. "Neither do I." "We should mark the coordinates," he said. "Report it when we get out." I agreed. He pulled the topo map from his pack and I gave him the GPS reading from my phone. He marked it with a pencil, a small X in the middle of a stretch of forest with no trails marked on it. Then he folded the map and put it away. I took 3 more photos of the hollow, stepping back each time to get a wider angle. I wanted to make sure I had something to show someone when we got back. I didn't check to see if the photos saved. I didn't want to know yet. Edwin stood up and brushed the dirt from his knees. He looked at the hollow one more time, then turned and walked back toward the trail. I followed him. Neither of us spoke on the way back to camp. That night we made camp on a ridgeline about 2 miles past the hollow. The site had a good clearing and a flat stretch for the tents. Edwin and Freddie set up the bear hang while Madison and I got the stove going. Kennedy collected firewood even though we weren't supposed to build a fire this deep in the backcountry. Frank didn't help with any of it. He sat on a log near his tent and ate an energy bar without speaking, then went into his tent while it was still light out. After we'd eaten, Madison came over and sat down next to me on the ground cloth I'd laid out. She kept her voice low. "What did you actually find out there?" I described the objects: the wallet, the license with the woman's name, the child's shoe, the hunting knife. I told her about the arrangement of them, the way they'd been placed instead of dropped. She listened without interrupting. "That's strange," she said when I finished. Freddie had been listening from where he sat a few feet away. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Could it be a geocache?" he asked. "Like someone set it up as a game and it went wrong?" "Maybe," I said. I didn't think so, but I didn't know what else to say. Kennedy looked up from the stuff sack she'd been repacking. "It sounds like someone lost their wallet and someone else found it and left it there, like a lost and found." No one responded to that. It didn't feel right, and I think everyone knew it. A lost and found wouldn't have a child's shoe and a hunting knife and a prayer card all together like that. It wouldn't be hidden 15 feet off the trail in a root hollow lined with stones. The conversation died after that. Edwin was on the other side of camp, sitting on a rock with his back to us, looking out at the ridge line. I couldn't see his face. After a while, Madison went to her tent, and Freddie followed. Kennedy stayed up a little longer, writing something in a notebook by headlamp. Then she zipped herself into her tent too. I sat outside until it was full dark. I could hear Frank shifting around in his tent, the sound of his sleeping bag rustling, but he didn't come back out. Edwin was still sitting on the rock. I thought about going over to talk to him, but I didn't. Eventually, I went into my tent and lay down on top of my sleeping bag. I'd taken the folded piece of notebook paper from the hollow before we left. I don't know why I took it. I hadn't planned to. But when Edwin was marking the GPS coordinates, I'd reached into the hollow and picked it up and put it in my jacket pocket. No one saw me do it. I pulled it out now and unfolded it under the light of my headlamp. The paper was cheap, the kind you'd tear from a spiral notebook, and the edges were frayed. There was writing on it in blue ink, a list of names running down the left side of the page. 12 names, one below the other, each one written in a different hand. Some were in print, some in cursive. The ink changed from line to line. Dark blue, then black, then blue again, then a lighter black that looked like it had faded. The last name on the list was written in pencil, lighter than the rest, and the letters were smaller, like whoever wrote it had been trying not to take up too much space. I read through the list twice. The names meant nothing to me. I didn't recognize any of them. But the more I looked at the paper, the more I understood what I was looking at. These were not the names of people who had left the objects in the hollow. These were names that had been added to the list by whoever came through before. One name at a time. Different people, different hands, different inks. 12 names, written over who knew how long, by 12 different people. I folded the paper again and set it on my chest. The tent fabric moved slightly in the breeze, and I could hear the trees shifting on the ridge. Frank coughed once in his tent. Edwin's tent zipper opened and then closed. Everything was quiet after that. I lay in the dark with the note resting on my chest, 12 names in different hands running through my mind, and I did not close my eyes. I left camp before first light, while the others were still asleep. I told myself I was just going to check the hollow one more time, that I needed to see it again, to make sure I hadn't imagined the arrangement of objects or misread something on that handwritten list. But the truth was I couldn't stop thinking about it. The wallet with Ivy Bryant's license, the child's shoe, the prayer card, all of it sitting there in that root hollow like an altar or a memorial to people who were gone. I used my headlamp to navigate back to the red oak. The forest was quiet in that pre-dawn way where even the birds haven't started yet, and my boots on the leaf litter sounded too loud. When I found the tree, I knelt beside the hollow and moved the folded red nylon cloth aside. The objects were still there. The woman's wallet. The child's sneaker with the Velcro tab still fastened. The hunting knife with initials carved into the handle. Everything I had photographed the day before. Sitting on top of the pile in the center of the hollow, placed directly on top of everything else, was my driver's license. I picked it up. My name, my photo, my home address in Morgantown. The expiration date was correct. The lamination looked identical to the one in my wallet. I turned it over. The signature on the back was mine, the same way I always signed my name, with the E and the W connected in that loop I'd been making since high school. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my wallet. My hands were shaking a little, but I got it open and checked the card slot where I kept my license. It was still there. I held both of them up, one in each hand, and looked back and forth between them in the beam of my headlamp. They were identical. Same photo, same address, same expiration date, same signature. I couldn't tell which one was supposed to be the real one. I had not been back to this hollow since yesterday afternoon. I had been at camp all night. I had been asleep until an hour ago. I did not put this here. I slid the license from the hollow into my jacket pocket and stood up. I didn't touch anything else. I didn't move the nylon cloth back over the pile. I just turned around and walked back to camp, moving faster than I needed to, my headlamp bouncing in front of me. When I got back, Edwin was still in his sleeping bag, but his eyes were open, staring up at the fabric of his tent. I unzipped the rain fly and crouched down next to him. "Edwin," I said, "I need to show you something." He sat up slowly, rubbing his face. He didn't ask why I had left camp or where I'd been. He just looked at me and waited. I pulled both licenses out and handed them to him. He took them and held them up to the light filtering through the tent fabric. It was getting brighter now, the sun starting to come up, and the gray morning light was enough to see by. He looked at the first one, then the second, then back to the first. He turned them over and checked the signatures. He held them side by side and compared the photos. He didn't say anything for a long time. "They're the same," he said finally. "I know. Where did you find this one?" He held up the one from the hollow. "In the cache, sitting on top of everything else. I went back this morning to look at it again, and it was just there." Edwin kept staring at the licenses. His expression was calm, but it was the kind of calm that didn't feel right, like he was working hard to keep it that way. "Your wallet was in your pocket all night?" he asked. "Yes." "You didn't take your license out for any reason?" "No." He handed them back to me, and I put one in my wallet and one back in my jacket pocket. I still didn't know which was which. Edwin was quiet again. He looked past me, toward the direction of the hollow, even though he couldn't see it from here. The trees were too thick, and we were too far away. "I want to go back there," he said quietly. I looked at him holding his sleeping bag in his lap, the morning light turning everything gray and flat, and I said, "Okay." I took Edwin back to the hollow. He didn't say much on the walk over, just followed me through the undergrowth with that same calm look on his face he'd had since I showed him the license, the one that belonged to me, but shouldn't have existed. When we got there, he crouched down beside the cache without hesitating, like he'd been planning to do this all along. He went through it piece by piece, slowly, the way a person reads something they've been given time to think about. He picked up the child's shoe, the small one with the Velcro tab still fastened, and turned it over in his hands, looking at it from different angles. Then he set it down carefully, exactly where it had been. He read the prayer card next, his lips moving slightly as he went through the words. Then he put that back too. I watched him open the woman's wallet, the brown leather one, cracked at the fold. He pulled out Ivy Bryant's license, the one from Roanoke, Virginia, issued in 2009, and stared at it for a long moment. His expression didn't change. He wasn't trying to solve anything. He was just looking at it the way you look at something you already understand. Then he reached into his back pocket and took out his own wallet. I knew what he was going to do before he did it. I should have grabbed his arm right then, should have stopped him, but I didn't move. I just stood there and watched him place it gently into the center of the hollow, on top of the pile. His hands were steady. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't crying. He just set it down like he was putting something where it belonged. He stood up and wiped his hands on his jeans, and when he looked at me, his expression wasn't frightened. It was settled. It was the expression of someone who had made a decision they had been working toward for some time, and had finally gotten around to doing it. "What are you doing?" I asked. My voice came out louder than I meant it to. "I don't know how to explain it," Edwin said. He said it calmly, not like he was confused or scared or trying to justify himself, just stating a fact. "It feels right," he added, "in a way I can't argue with." He said it the way a person describes being tired, not distressed, just factual. I grabbed his arm, hard enough that he looked down at where my hand was gripping his jacket. "We're leaving," I said. "Right now, all 6 of us. We're turning around and walking back to the trailhead." He looked up at me and nodded. "Okay," he said. He said it agreeably, without resistance, in the same settled tone he'd been using since he put the wallet down. I looked at his face and tried to find something wrong with it, some sign that he wasn't himself, but there was nothing. No vacancy, no fear, no agitation, just the expression of a person who had finished something, and that was more unsettling to me than any other expression would have been. Edwin stood there, his hands at his sides, and looked at me with that settled expression, and I tightened my grip on his arm and said, "We're going. Now." I got back to camp walking faster than I needed to, and Edwin followed behind me without speaking. The others were sitting near the tents. Madison was refilling her water bottle. Freddie had his map out and was studying it the way people do when they don't have anything else to occupy their hands. Kennedy looked up when she saw us coming. Frank was crouched by his pack, checking the straps. I told them we were cutting the trip short. I said we were leaving immediately. Kennedy asked what I had found. I said I would explain later. She asked again. I said the same thing. Madison stood up and started rolling her sleeping bag without asking another question. Freddie folded his map and tucked it into his jacket pocket. Frank said nothing. He was already packing his bag. We broke camp in 40 minutes. Nobody argued. Nobody asked me to reconsider. I think they had all felt something wrong in the air since the day before, the way you feel a storm coming before the sky changes. Frank had been quiet for 2 days. Edwin had been too calm. I had been checking over my shoulder every few minutes without meaning to. Whatever I had found in that hollow, it was only the thing that gave us permission to acknowledge what we already knew. I took the lead. Edwin had given me his compass the night before, and I had the topo map folded in my jacket pocket. I checked them both every few hundred yards and kept us moving southwest, back toward the maintained trail system. The forest looked the same as it had for 3 days. The trees were the same trees. The undergrowth was thick and green and tangled the same way it had been tangled on the way in. Nothing moved in the canopy that I could see. Nothing followed us that I could hear. But I walked fast anyway, and the others kept pace. By mid-afternoon, we had covered 8 miles. I stopped to check the map and calculate how far we still had to go. The answer was more than a day at this pace. Maybe 20 hours of walking if we didn't stop. I stood there with the map open on my knee and did the math twice to make sure I was right. The sun was already low. It would be dark in a few hours. If we made camp now, we would reach the trailhead by tomorrow evening. If we pushed through the night, we could be out by dawn. I made the decision without consulting anyone. I folded the map and stood up and told the group I was going to walk the night. I said anyone who wanted to stop and camp should stop. I said it as a statement of fact, not as a question. Frank said we should all stop. He said it quietly, the way he had been saying everything for 2 days. Madison looked at me and said she would walk with me. Freddie said the same. Kennedy nodded and adjusted the straps on her pack. Edwin said he was going to make camp here. He said he would see us at the trailhead tomorrow. I looked at him for a long moment. He was standing with his pack still on, his hands in his jacket pockets, his expression settled and calm. I could see the edge of his wallet in his left pocket. His own wallet. The wallet he had placed in the hollow that morning and then retrieved when we left, or replaced, or something I could not determine and had not asked him to explain. I did not know if it was the same wallet. I did not know if it mattered. I told him to be careful. He said he would. He said it the way a person says goodbye when they know it is the last time. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking. I wanted to ask him why he had put his wallet in that hollow and why he was choosing to stay behind now when we were less than a day from safety. I wanted to grab him by the arm and tell him he was coming with us whether he wanted to or not. But I did not do any of those things. I stood there and looked at him and tried to think of something to say that would change his mind, and I could not think of anything. So I turned around and started walking. Freddie fell in behind me, then Madison, then Kennedy. I did not look back after the first 100 yards. I told myself Edwin would be fine. I told myself he would make camp and sleep through the night and walk out in the morning and meet us at the trailhead. I told myself that over and over again as I walked, and I did not believe it. The sun dropped below the ridgeline and the forest went dim. I took out the compass and checked it against the map and kept us moving southwest. Behind me, I could hear Freddie and Madison and Kennedy walking in a line, their footsteps steady and quiet. The sound of Edwin settling his pack behind us faded and did not return. I walked forward into the darkening forest without looking back, the compass in one hand and the topo map folded in the other. We walked through the night, the 4 of us in a line. I led with the compass and the topo map, checking them every few minutes under the headlamp Madison carried. Freddie walked behind me, then Kennedy, then Madison at the back with the light. Nobody spoke unless they had to. The forest was dark in a way that felt deliberate, and the headlamp beam only reached about 20 feet ahead before the trees swallowed it. Around midnight, Freddie's headlamp died. He shook it a few times and pressed the button repeatedly, but nothing happened. We shared Madison's after that, passing it back and forth when someone needed to see the trail ahead or check their footing. The batteries were getting weak by then, and the light was yellowing, dimming with every hour. I kept my eyes on the compass. We were heading southwest, retracing the route we'd taken 3 days earlier, and the maintained section of the Appalachian Trail was roughly 14 miles from where we'd started. I told myself we'd reach it by dawn if we kept moving. I didn't let myself think about what would happen if we didn't. Kennedy asked once if we should rest. I said no. She didn't ask again. The forest was quiet. I had expected it to feel hostile or wrong, the way it had felt when I'd walked back from the hollow that morning, but it didn't. It just felt empty. The trees were the same trees. The undergrowth was the same undergrowth. Nothing followed us that I could hear. Nothing moved in the darkness beyond the reach of the headlamp. It was just a forest, and we were just 4 people walking through it. Near dawn, the trail widened and the undergrowth thinned out. I recognized the marker on the tree ahead before Madison's headlamp reached it. A white blaze painted on the bark, faded but unmistakable. The maintained trail. We had made it. Madison let out a breath I hadn't realized she'd been holding. Freddie said something quiet that might have been a thank you or might have been nothing. Kennedy stopped walking and stood there for a moment, staring at the marker like she didn't trust it. I kept moving. The trailhead was 4 miles from here. I told them we were almost done. The sun came up while we were walking the last stretch. The light filtered through the canopy in thin beams, illuminating patches of the trail ahead. And for the first time in hours, I could see clearly without the headlamp. The forest looked normal. It looked like a place people went hiking. It looked like a place I could have walked into on any other weekend and walked out of without incident. My car was in the parking lot when we reached it. I had known it would be, but seeing it there made something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. I unlocked it and threw my pack in the back seat. Freddie, Madison, and Kennedy did the same with theirs, and I drove them to their cars one by one, pulling up beside each vehicle and waiting while they got out. Nobody said much. Madison thanked me for getting us out. Kennedy asked if I was going to be okay. I said I was fine. Freddie just nodded and closed the door. I didn't wait for Edwin. I thought about it. I sat in the parking lot for maybe 30 seconds with the engine running, looking at the trailhead entrance, and then I put the car in gear and drove west on Route 33 toward Elkins. I told myself Edwin would be fine. I told myself he'd walk out later that day and drive home and send a text saying everything was okay. I kept telling myself that for the next hour and a half. I didn't stop until I needed gas. There was a Sunoco station on Route 20 outside Buckhannon, just off the highway, and I pulled in and parked beside one of the pumps. My hands were shaking when I turned off the engine. I hadn't noticed until then. I filled the tank and went inside to pay. The clerk was a kid, maybe 20, and he barely looked at me while he ran my card. I walked back out to the car and reached into my jacket for my wallet. It wasn't there. I checked my back pocket. Nothing. I checked the center console, the cup holder, the floor of the passenger seat. I checked the back seat where I'd thrown my pack and unzipped every pocket. My wallet was gone. I stood in the parking lot trying to remember the last time I'd taken it out. The gas station clerk had run my card. That meant I'd had it when I walked inside. But I couldn't remember pulling it out of my jacket. I couldn't remember holding it. I tried to picture the moment, reaching into my pocket, handing the card over, and the memory wouldn't form. I checked my breast pocket for my phone and felt something else instead. Paper. Stiff and glossy. I pulled it out. It was a photograph. A printed photograph, the size of a standard 4x6 print, the edges straight and clean. The paper was slightly glossy, the kind you'd get from a photo lab or a home printer. I didn't own a printer. I hadn't printed anything. I hadn't put this in my pocket. The photograph showed the hollow from above. The angle was high, maybe 15 or 20 feet off the ground, like someone had climbed a tree or used a drone. But the perspective was wrong for either. The hollow was in the center of the frame, clearly visible between the roots of the red oak, and the objects inside it were arranged exactly the way I remembered them. The wallet, my wallet, sat on top of the pile in the middle. In the background, partially obscured by branches, a figure was walking away from the hollow. The figure was wearing my jacket, the same jacket I was wearing now. The figure's face was turned slightly to the side, just enough to see the profile, just enough to identify. It was me. The photograph had been taken after I left the hollow on the morning of the 4th day. I had been alone when I left. I had been certain of that. I had looked back twice while walking away, checking to make sure no one was following, and there had been no one. No one standing above me. No one in the trees. No one with a camera. I sat in the car for a long time with the photograph face up on the passenger seat. I stared at it. The hollow, the wallet, the figure in the jacket. Me, walking away from something I had already left behind. Then I turned it face down. I didn't want to look at it anymore. I pulled out my phone and called Edwin. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I hung up and called again. 6 rings. Voicemail. I hung up. I drove the rest of the way home to Morgantown. 90 minutes on Route 20 and then Route 119 south, the road winding through towns I'd driven through 100 times before. The photograph stayed on the passenger seat face down. I didn't touch it. I didn't look at it. I kept my eyes on the road and my hands on the wheel and tried not to think about the wallet sitting on top of the pile in the hollow, or Edwin crouching beside it with that settled expression on his face, or the fact that my wallet was gone and I couldn't remember when I'd last seen it. I pulled into my driveway in Morgantown just before noon. The house looked the same as it always did. The porch light was still on from when I'd left 5 days earlier. The mailbox was full. I turned off the engine and sat there with the photograph on the seat beside me, face down, while Edwin's phone rang 6 times in my ear and went to voicemail again. I called Edwin twice more that evening after getting home to Morgantown. Both times it rang 6 times and went to voicemail. The second time I left a message asking him to call me back when he got a chance. I tried to make it sound casual, like I wasn't worried. Then I called Freddie. "Have you heard from Edwin?" I asked. "No," Freddie said. "I figured he just drove home and went to sleep. Why?" "Just checking," I said, "making sure everyone made it out okay." Freddie was quiet for a moment, and I wondered if he could hear something in my voice that I was trying to hide. But he just said he'd let me know if Edwin reached out, and we hung up. I didn't tell Freddie about the photograph. I didn't tell anyone about the photograph. I took it out of my jacket pocket and looked at it one more time in the light of my kitchen. The image was clear. The hollow. The objects. My wallet on top of the pile. And in the background, partially obscured by branches, a figure in my jacket walking away along the trail. I put the photograph in the kitchen drawer next to the silverware tray, face down, and closed the drawer. I didn't open it again that night. 3 days passed. I called Edwin every morning. Every call went to voicemail. On the second day, I drove to a grocery store and bought things I didn't need just so I wouldn't be sitting in my apartment waiting for my phone to ring. On the third day, Freddie called me first. "I'm driving back to Seneca Rocks," he said. "I want to check on Edwin's car." "Okay," I said. "Call me when you get there." He said he would. I sat at my kitchen table and waited. The drawer with the photograph in it was 3 feet away. I thought about opening it. I didn't. Freddie called 2 hours later from the parking lot at the Seneca Rocks trailhead. "His car's still here," Freddie said. "No note on the windshield. I checked the ranger station and they said there's no record of him signing back in on the trail register." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What did the ranger say?" "She said she'd file a report. I'm going to talk to her now." "Okay." Freddie hung up. I sat at the table and didn't move. I thought about the last thing Edwin had said to me on the trail when I told him to be careful. He'd said he would. He'd said it the way a person says goodbye. Not like they're leaving for a little while. Like they're leaving for good. I thought about the list of names I'd found in the hollow, written in different hands and different inks, like they'd been added by different people at different times. 12 names. I'd memorized them without meaning to. I could see them in my mind, written in pencil and pen and marker, overlapping in places where the paper had been folded and unfolded too many times. I thought about whether my name had been on that list, or whether it was on it now. The drawer was 3 feet away. I didn't open it. Freddie called back 20 minutes later. "I talked to the ranger," he said. "Same woman who stamped our permit when we started, Maggie Park. She pulled our paperwork and noted that Edwin never signed back in. She filed a report. She said there'll be a search." "What happens now?" I asked. "They'll send a team out," Freddie said. "She said it might take a few days to organize. She didn't seem... I don't know. She didn't seem surprised." I was quiet. "Eugene?" "Yeah." "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Thanks for going back to check." "Of course," Freddie said. "I'll let you know if I hear anything." We hung up. I sat at the table for a long time after that. The light coming through the window shifted as the sun moved across the sky, but I didn't get up. I thought about Edwin crouching beside the hollow, going through the objects piece by piece, the way a person reads something they've been given time to think about. I thought about him taking his wallet out of his back pocket and placing it gently into the center of the pile. I thought about his face when he stood up, not frightened, settled. The drawer with the photograph in it stayed closed. I didn't take it out. I didn't look at it again. I just sat there, not moving, until the light in the room turned orange and then gray and then dark. At the Seneca Rocks Forest Service Visitor Center, Maggie Park pulled Edwin Fernandez's permit from the file and made a note in the margin with a blue pen. Did not return. 6/18. She dated it and initialed it and filed the report the same way she had filed 37 others in the last 9 years. Her face was blank. Her hand moved across the paper without hesitation. When she was finished, she placed the permit back in the file and closed the drawer. Then she looked up at the desk, where a group of 4 hikers was waiting with their packs at their feet and their maps spread out on the counter. "We're doing the Spruce Knob Loop," one of them said. 5 days, 4 nights. Maggie Park nodded. She took the blank permit from the stack beside her and filled in the dates and the trailhead and the number of people in the party. She stamped it with the green ink stamp that said Monongahela National Forest in a circle around the Forest Service shield. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper was sharp and clean. She slid the permit across the desk. "This section has an unusually high rate of incomplete returns," she said. Her voice was flat and unhurried. "You'll want to check in at the ranger station when you finish your hike." The hiker at the front of the group took the permit and folded it into his jacket pocket. "Thanks," he said. Maggie Park's hand returned to the counter, resting beside the stack of blank permits. Her face didn't change. She looked at the group the way she had looked at Edwin Fernandez's group 5 days earlier, and the way she would look at the next group tomorrow, and the one after that. Nothing had changed. For her, nothing ever did. The hikers picked up their packs and left through the front door, and the bell above it chimed once as the door swung shut. Maggie Park sat at the desk and waited for the next group to arrive.